if you make the mistake of going into an organization as a leader and asking that question, you're going to be dealing with that issue. If you open up the doors and not take the authority from the very beginning, then you've already set the stage that you're not there to lead. You're there to just run what other people's ideas are.
Welcome to another episode of the Growth League podcast. I'm your host, Caleb Clark, and I am chatting today with Amy Machin. She is the Director of Marketing at Apex Scoring System. I'm going to have to get you to tell us a little bit more about the company, what you guys do, but Apex Scoring System is the AI-powered platform that reveals your customers' true desires and translates them into data-driven initiatives that boost your KPIs. So, Amy, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit more about Apex, and then I'd like to dive into you after that.
Well, thank you for having me. So Apex is a CX measurement platform that kind of picks up where metrics like CSAT and NPS leave off, because that's it's really, it gives users a clear sense of the why behind these scores, and then specifically what they need to do to improve those scores. It actually gives meaning. A lot of those metrics that exist are kind of lacking the directive approach, which is kind of what Apex provides. So
for us not familiar with the types of companies you serve, or the the business efficiency and data visual, data uncovering that you create, can you explain it to the neophyte?
I'll try. So the methodology used to back up the tool is it's backed by behavioral science, and it really dives deep into the emotional aspect of decision making.
Okay.
And so that really helps understand the why decisions are made. And a lot of people, myself included, before I came to learn about the methodology, they don't understand the importance that emotions play in decision making. But what I've really come to learn is that the majority of decisions are made emotionally and then rationalized after the fact. So if you aren't taking into account emotions, you're really not getting like the whole picture, and it really leaves a lot of room for guessing when it comes to like loyalty and engagement.
Right.
So it's certainly something that it's like super important to be tracking.
For you, you're relatively new at Apex and you're leading the marketing function there. Tell me a little bit about your role and what you've learned in this short period of time as it relates to leading a marketing function, and some of the interesting things, some of the challenges along the way. Tell us about you've been there for 6 months now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I joined 6 months ago. And it was a really exciting time to join because up until about December, not a lot had been invested in marketing. So I kind of walked into like a blank canvas, which is an absolute dream for someone like me.
Or a nightmare for other people, but
that's it. Like it's all somebody like me. Like I love to just be so hands-on and just be handed something and be told to, and that's exactly what happened. Like walked in, like, yes, something with like there's a lot of pressure that comes along with that, because and like a lot of expectations. Like I was like, I don't know. But it's exciting to come into something that you believe in, and then but with like an unbiased lens, so you can go in and just someone goes like, have at her.
yeah.
So
and what is the role that the marketing function needs to play right now for Apex, or what is it meant to be doing? Obviously, generating some demand and some clients, but more detailed than that.
Well, it's everything really. Like anybody in a small, like who works in marketing on a small team would know that like you're kind of all over the place. And it's really like building everything from messaging, branding, language from the bottom up. And I think like the thing that I came into, which was very clear from the very beginning, was that there was just like a lack of understanding of the simplicity and even just the product in general. Was very widely seen as a nice to have
Mm,
and not a need to have. But when you truly understand the product and the clients who have used it, it is an absolute need to have when implemented within your systems effectively. So
right.
I saw that as my, my biggest thing, like to tackle. Like if people don't understand your product, then they don't understand how it could possibly relate to their business when it is such a universal product. There's a lot of work to be done. So
Yeah. And when you first came in, was that an assessment that you made that there wasn't a compelling or strong position, or was it part of the mandate in bringing you in? Hey, nobody knows about what we do. They're seeing us as a nice to have, not a must have. We need your support to guide through this. How did
I
that go?
think like when I started, I had like a little checklist on my phone of the top things that I wanted to prioritize and the way, like nothing by any means in the form of like a plan, but like just the things that I thought should be focused on and things that I wanted to discuss right away. And it aligned with what everybody had already been talking about, even though I wasn't even a part of those conversations. So
Right.
it was a pretty
That's
everyone,
interesting.
yeah, from the very beginning, we were just all on the same page, which is nice.
That's great. You mentioned CX designers as kind of a good audience for the use of the tool, but who's typically making the decisions for the companies that you're approaching in terms of bringing Apex on and weaving it into their system? Who's typically the decision makers?
It varies depending on the company. So, um, like we've actually been adjusting our messaging slightly to be more to be speaking to the decision maker, which in many cases isn't the user.
Right.
Some of the cases, the decision maker is insights because they're the ones leading the insights team. They'll be using it and they'll be deploying it across their department. So it really does depend. I think we're probably leaning more towards like the CEOs, the CMOs within organizations. Um, but there has been like it's been
So
kind of all
because there's that variance, I'd imagine that you need to tailor the way you go to market and the way
exactly.
you. Okay.
So you kind of have like when you're telling the story and depending on who you're speaking to, you have to be identifying the pain points of that individual person. So if you're speaking to somebody in insights who may be the one in charge of the decisions, you're speaking to them about the pain points they deal from like a user perspective.
Right.
And if it's a CEO, you're talking about like the operational
Right.
impacts that they have. It's just a different.
And were those pain points pretty well established as being these are the true pain points when you got there, or were they kind of assumptions that you had to validate, or were they things that you had to identify out of nowhere and then reverse engineer from there?
I think there may have been assumptions, but there has been so much learning that's taken place in the last 6 months. I would say everything from what was assumed when I started is probably different, from meetings, from advisors, from testing, conversations. Like there has been so much growth
Interesting.
and learning, and it's good to be a part of that and get ahead of
Yeah,
that before you're deep into
totally. Well,
market.
for some people, I think, like you mentioned, those types of scenarios where you have a lot of blank slate opportunity, that's conducive with how you like to do things, but it could be a challenge for others as well. So, leads me to my next question, which is about what have you identified for yourself over the first 6 months there, or even in any other marketing roles in the past? As a marketer and a marketing leader, what do you claim are your superpowers, your top one or two superpowers that you lean on pretty heavily, and you're self-aware enough to know that this is your red cape? What is that for you?
I'm laughing because it was like in a conversation the other day, and somebody said to me that I work with, who's like, you know what, you're just scrappy. And I was like, I don't know if that's a good thing. And then I
I
thought
think it
about it.
is.
I was like, that is a good thing. Like, and I would say it's very accurate. Like, I think being scrappy has enabled me to develop like the skill set that I have. So like when you work in primarily like founder owned or startup environments, it's like so often that your role will extend beyond your job description. And you're forced, you kind of just have to do what you've got to do to get the job done. And I think throughout my career, I've been able to do that well. And it's like, it's forced me to learn new skills that I have now, that I'm so happy that I have now, that I may never have thought to learn.
Right.
But I think like I love to do it is the big thing. Like I like being scrappy. I like that somebody, the more I thought about it, like not everybody can say that they're scrappy and they like to be scrappy and they want to be scrappy. So
Yeah. Does scrappy mean, does it mean like trying a bunch of things quickly to see if they work, or is it to
just like I think of it as like being extremely resourceful and like just like figuring it out. Like if you're given a job, you're like, give me the job.
Yeah.
I will, next time we talk, don't
Yeah.
ask any questions. It will be done. And you don't need to ask how I got it done, but it's going to be done.
That's awesome. And you thrive in those situations. You don't see that as a challenge, kind of
Not at all.
like,
It's my favorite. I think it's like what keeps you like on your toes and keeps it exciting. Like I met with a large company once, like this was years ago, and they were asking me like what I would want to do or like what my favorite thing to do was. And I couldn't cut down the list. And they said, well, in companies like this, like you have this role and this is your role, and you don't, and that terrified me to think that I couldn't be all
right.
over the place. Everything was different. It's for some people and it's not for everybody.
What would you claim your weaknesses to be in this marketing leadership role?
I'm with this scrappiness, I guess comes, like I'm working on delegating. So, and I know that seems so simple,
No?
but I think for a long time, I would look at delegating as like a sign of weakness,
Hmm.
or it would come off as like laziness. But I've come to realize that like by not delegating, it's compromising so many things. Like it's going, regardless if you say it's going to compromise the quality of work, it's going into your personal time. It's going to you're eventually going to get burned out. And so once you come to realize that like an effective leader isn't going to be a good leader unless they're delegating,
Right.
it becomes much more easy to just
Yeah.
make it a part of your process.
So it sounds like you've come to that realization. Is this weakness slowly becoming a strength for you, or is it in process?
Oh, it's in process. I think it's something that people will need to remind me. They're like, you know that people can help you. I'm like, oh.
That's awesome.
So no.
For Apex right now, I mean, you've had enough time there to kind of get a suss of the land and figure out what's what. What have you identified as currently the top marketing challenge or challenges that you and the company are faced with as it relates to marketing?
So okay, I guess the stage we're currently in, I would say prioritization is definitely a challenge. When you're in a startup, like everything could be looked at as a priority.
Hmm.
So it can be challenging to decide what out of everything that needs to get tackled should be tackled first. That's like one of your first questions. I was like everything, like bottom up. And then you have to like factor in opinions from other people. And then so you really have to learn how to be confident in your decisions, because it's really easy to get sidetracked when it's like ideas are coming at you from every angle. So like being able to make sure, it's so important that like internally everything's aligned. So priorities across the board, everybody knows what's going on. So those voices don't kind of come out of nowhere and then you get sidetracked and, especially when you have limited resources a lot of the time and sometimes budget.
Yeah. Are you good in the field of prioritization, and are people relying on you right now to kind of be that voice of, hey, let's make the one thing the one thing?
Yeah. And I've learned, like, in other roles, I think it probably a few years ago, if you asked me, it would have been much harder for me to, because like I say yes to everything. I'm just like, it's very hard for me to say no. So but I've learned that, like, I'm here for a reason. It's my job, and it's very easy to get walked all over if you're not very clear and firm about what you're working on and how interruption of that can impact the overall goals of the organization. So,
Yeah.
like, patience comes a lot with that. Like there's so many things that you want to be doing, that everybody wants to be doing, and everybody's thing that they want to be working on is the most important thing.
Hmm.
And so sometimes it could be hard, and I've had to, like, have these conversations with people about, like, patience when it comes to, like, just waiting your turn for, like, the next big thing, because you just kind of have to say, like, trust the process. Like,
Right.
it's so easy to just kind of move on to the next thing and the next initiative before the one you're working on has really had its full time to kind of see what the outcome is going to be.
Right.
And
And
I've been in situations before where I've been pressured to kind of forfeit something before it's really had its time, and then moved on to something. And then, like, by doing so, like, you don't ever get the outcome that you
Right.
want.
so in the growth journey of Apex, where marketing team is really small and in many cases non-existent, how do you create team when you're representing the marketing function and you need buy-in and participation and collaboration from other departments that don't necessarily touch marketing on a day-to-day?
Well, I think it's a lot about just, like, collaboration with the departments, because marketing has to support. It's not its own, like, in a small company, it's not its own thing doing its
Right.
own thing all the time. It's like it's a supportive department. Um, and
And really
so,
representative of everything the company is doing at that moment in time, right?
yeah, and like, during the strategic process, it's so important that everybody's working together during that development to make sure that what you're working on is supporting what everybody's goals are, what the organization's goals
Right.
are. So that, like, what can I do to help? Like, that was feedback I had received in previous roles, where people would say, well, there's always a disconnect between sales and marketing. And, like, marketing spends their days making all of this beautiful collateral and messaging and outreach that sales can never use because it doesn't sound like people, or it's not something I would say. Um, and, like, I've been guilty of that. I'm like, isn't that not the best email you've ever read? Like, that doesn't sound like a human. Like,
Right.
no. And so it's just, like, to be able to build those plans with the different departments during the creation process is how you kind of, like, get that buy-in.
Right. So what's been your experience in spending time with the sales team there, and how have you leveraged the insights that you've learned from them, to apply to what you're doing from a marketing standpoint?
Well, I think coming in, like, I'm not a salesperson, but I have, so kind of like that unbiased opinion.
Mhm.
So I'll listen to meetings after the fact. I'll go through notes, and sometimes I'm able to identify things that are things that we should be focusing on, that to me were like almost not a cry for help, but like something so easy to be like, this is what they're asking for. This is what we need
Right.
to show them. This is what the story that we need to add to our story. This is what we need to add to our visuals to make it clear, to make it so that they can take what we're telling them to whoever it is that they need to get them on board. Like,
Right.
and a lot of it just comes down, and because a lot of the time, like, sales won't necessarily be the ones to pull that out. It'll be other people from other departments and to identify these things.
I see. So you're saying that these are pieces of information or insights that haven't been explicitly communicated to you, but you've kind of sought them out through looking at notes or meeting recordings and kind of like given a name and a face to the things that haven't been spoken. It maybe aren't even known as being the problems.
Not always. Like sometimes people come out, like right out and say it. Like what, like following up if something doesn't go through and a sale doesn't go through, and it's always having that opportunity to be able to say like what went wrong.
Right.
And sometimes people are very open to have those conversations, give you that information, but in a lot of cases they aren't. So to be able to sometimes dig deep and figure it out, like what was it that, where did we lose them? And sometimes it is marketing, sometimes it is a part of the messaging, and even if it is a part of the sales story, the presentation, like how can I come in there and make it better, make this not happen again?
So I want to add, because there's certainly audience members who are playing the role of marketing leader in an organization that where there's a blank slate available to them. There's a lot of assumptions in the past that have been leveraged to make decisions on. But what advice would you give to marketing leaders that are brand new in an organization and they know deep down that they need to get out in front of the team and question assumptions and reprioritize things and have a little bit more of a commanding presence versus tell me what you need to do? Because it sounds like that's the scenario you've found yourself in.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also, and I think I've made that mistake before.
That's
But
awesome.
there's a difference. There's a shift when you change that view to say, okay, like this is what we are doing. This is the plan. This is what we're working on. And of course, like involve people, but make it very clear from the beginning that like, if you're wrong and you're terrible at your job, and they'll see that, but they bring you in as a leader for a reason.
Right.
That's your job. They should have trust that you know what you're doing when you get there. And then, a few months down the road, the results will start actually speaking that, but give the chance. And you should have the confidence to be able to stand up and say like, I will prove this to you. Just give me a few months.
So Amy, in the past, you've been on the agency side of things, and now you're on the client side. Is there anything that you've picked up or that you leverage from your agency side days that has equipped you well for the role you're in today?
Yeah, I think anybody who's ever worked in an agency knows that it's a very unique environment. It's not for everybody. It's very fast paced, and it's kind of like a sink or swim. And I think it's helped me a lot. It's really helped me with the work ethic I have, and being able to kind of navigate a lot of different expectations and situations that come up. There's not a lot of room in agencies for anything less than like 110%. So having that experience, I think it's really set me up to be where I am right now.
That's great. When you kind of close your eyes and think about Apex in the future, what excites you about the brand and the vision and where you're going? Why do you believe in what's going on there?
It's such an exciting company to be a part of, because I believe so much as a marketer in what it is. Anybody who is a marketer knows one of the biggest struggles of your job is proving your value in the organization, proving an ROI of the initiatives that you're working on, and to be able to be telling the story of a product or a solution that solves the problem that I face, so many marketers face. It's like such a relief, and it's like to be a part of something that is going to solve so many people's problems. And it's exciting because like, I already know the product's amazing. Like, it's about being a part of the story and then watching it grow and having more and more of those actual success stories to be able to tell, and being a part of that it's extremely rewarding.
That's great. What a great situation to be in when you actually believe in the product, right? And I
Yeah.
think the reason I say that is because there are a lot of marketing leaders out there that don't believe in the product that they're selling, and that's a tough spot to be in, right? It's if it's just a job, so it's a cool experience, and I imagine there's a million things you want to do, but based on capacity and all these types of things, you got to be really selective with what you do first. And there may be a day where you can do more things and contribute more to that story as you speak
Mhm.
about. So for you, you talked a little bit about how you keep yourself sharp on the product and the customer segments that you're serving, the problems that you're solving for them. But outside of the company, just in terms of like as a marketing leader and as a marketer, how do you keep yourself sharp? How do you educate yourself? Is there anything that you do, or do you just kind of?
Well, well, I know you said outside of the team, but like, I am lucky enough to be I work on a team where everybody is just like, it's learners. So I am constantly being fed like podcast episodes, webinars, white papers, Slack channels that I never would have known would have even existed, that are like relating to things outside of my department. And it's making me explore different things that I probably never would have looked up myself, but then they all kind of just like tie in together. So working alongside people day to day, of people who are learners, because like a lot of the time you are founders and they're very set in their ways and they know everything, but it's there's no excuse to never be learning. So
Yeah.
I do have that environment that I'm so lucky to lean on that a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
And I also like, I've met some very amazing, smart people working within the agency environment that have a knowledge that is like goes so far beyond a generalist. And so I always like to find ways to keep those people
Mm.
within my circle, even if it's just like weekly coffees, to have just that constant connection with people who are pretty much experts
Yeah.
in different areas that are so far beyond what my expertise is.
Mm.
And of course, like I would have to say events, because being a part of events in previous roles, it's just anytime you go to an event, and if you're not doing events and then you go to one, it's like you go to these places and like networking and connections that you make aside, it's just so much inspiration and information that you get in 3 days.
Yeah.
And you leave there feeling so inspired and just like you drank the juice and motivated, and you leave. And so in so many cases, like what you learn from these events, you go and they impact your strategy moving forward. And
Yeah.
I always like one a year at least. Yeah, I think it's super important.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I want to leave you with this question. It's a bit of kind of dreaming into the future again. But as the company grows and you continue to build on the momentum that you've already established, and when new team members start coming onto the scene, and whether that be a combination of internal team members or external partners, can you envision what type of a leader you're going to be and what some of your playbook is going to be in terms of building and managing and creating motivation for teams? Can you visualize that yet?
Yeah, I've led departments in other roles, and I love being a leader because I know what it feels like to have a really good leader and a mentor,
Mm.
and how much motivation comes with that. And I love being that person. I love creating environments where like micromanagement is so far removed from the type of dynamic I like to create. Like these people are brought in for a reason.
Right.
In a lot of cases, the assumption should be that their role that they're there for is they know something that I don't have the in-depth knowledge that they have. So I never like to create the environments where I'm coming in and telling an expert in how to do their job. It's very obvious if somebody isn't doing their job. But I really believe in environments where you let people work
Yeah.
and just being there for and like a part of the scrappiness is that never being too good for any job. Like if somebody on your team needs help and it's something you did years ago, you help them. You show them, you learn with them, you teach them, you figure it out together. It's such a huge part of leadership. I see that being in the future here, absolutely, and I'm really excited about it.
Well, that's great. I'm excited to see how your team and your department grows and starts to establish yourself. I'm excited to see how Apex continues to grow in momentum and kind of manifest some of those visualizations you told us about in terms of where you see the company going. And I think you're well set. I actually want to leave you with one last thing, which I should have asked at the beginning, which is, who is Amy outside of the marketing director of Apex? Like, what are some of the things that just light you up and fill your cup? Leave us with that.
Um, I am laughing because if I act, I'm like, I like TikTok and
Good.
I like I I love my kids. I have 3 kids and all in very competitive sports. So my free time and my passions are kind of through their activities as well. Um, I grew up as a dancer and my daughter is now a dancer. And so to be, spending my weekends with her at dance competitions and with my son at hockey tournaments is like, I'm not complaining. It's
That's
a lot of
awesome.
fun.
Well, unlike you, I did not grow up as a dancer, and my daughter is currently a dancer. So I find it pretty hilarious going to an event here shortly, like a, what do you call it, like a
Recital.
pageant or yeah, recital, not a pageant. And usually I'm like one of the only dads there, and it's just like, but I'm definitely tapping into my past sort of athletic career and the competitiveness. And I'm like, Naya, let's go. I was like, that plie was terrible or whatever it was. No, I
Keep
don't say that.
sweating.
Well, that's awesome. Amy, thank you so much. Really excited to see how this continues to evolve. And I appreciate you sharing your perspective and time and your playbook on some of these common topics and challenges forced upon other marketing leaders out there.
Thank you so much for having me. And and through their activities, through their activities, through their activities as well. Um, I grew up through their activities as a dancer, and my daughters as well. Um, I grew up through their activities as a dancer, and my daughter is now a dancer, and so as well. Um, I grew up to be, spending my weekends with her at dance competitions and with my son through their activities at hockey tournaments is as a dancer, and my daughter is now a dancer, and so as well. Um, like I'm not. I grew up to be, spending cleaning. It's my weekends with her, spending cleaning. It's
Be hilarious going to an event
my weekends with her.
here shortly, like a, what do you call it, like a
Recital.
pageant or yeah, recital, not a pageant. And usually I'm like one of the only dads there, and it's just like, but
Spending cleaning. It's
be hilarious going to an event. I'm
my weekends with her.
definitely tapping into my past sort of athletic career here shortly, like a what do you call it? Like a and the a
Recital.
pageant or yeah, recital, not a pageant. And usually I'm like one of the only dads there, competitiveness, and it's just like, but I'm like, Naya, let's go. I was
Spending cleaning. It's
like, that plie was terrible or whatever. Be hilarious. No, going to an event. I'm
sweating.
well, that's awesome. Amy, thank you so much. Really excited to see how this continues
My weekends with her.
to evolve. And I appreciate you definitely tapping into my past sort of athletic career here shortly, like sharing your perspective. What do you call it? Like a and the a
Recital.
pageant or and time and yeah, recital, not a pageant. And usually I'm like in your playbook on some like one of the only dads there, competitiveness, and it's just like, but I'm like, Naya, let's go. I was
Spending cleaning. It's
like, that plie was terrible. These common terrible or whatever. Be hilarious. No, going to an event. I'm
sweating.
well, that's awesome. Amy, thank you so much. Really excited to see how this continues
My weekends with her.
to evolve. And I appreciate you definitely tapping into my past sort of athletic career here shortly, like sharing your perspective. What do you call it? Like a and the a
Recital.
pageant or in time and topics and challenges forced upon other yeah, recital, not a pageant for marketing leaders out there. And
Thank you so much
usually I'm like
for having me.
in your playbook on some like one of the only dads there, and it's just like, but I'm like, Naya, let's go. I was
Spending cleaning. It's
like, that plie was terrible. These common topics.